What really shifted the way I approach enablement is when I started looking at who are the personas that are showing up the most in our close won deals. I've actually like adapted the original buyer enablement framework that came from Gartner to a lot of the clients that I use. Essentially, it's four key decisions. What is our problem? What are the approaches or solutions we could take? What are the trade-offs? And then the third being, what are the capabilities and metrics we need to achieve for success? And lastly, who are the vendors and other suppliers that can meet those other three requirements? Most of the time when sellers don't adopt something, it's because they don't believe that it works. So you have to put a lot of effort and energy in the beginning to making sure that the team sees that it works.
If you can finish the sentence for me, sales leaders would be 10x more effective if they just Lawrence, my man, how's it going?
Doing good, man. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Where are you based right now? What's the journey? What are you working on these days? Give us
Yeah.
all the good stuff.
So I am an expat, born and raised in Chicago. Lived in Atlanta for 10 years, but now I live in North London with my wife and my baby girl. So uh, spent most of my adult life in the States, but over the past, I've been here for about 4 years now. Got my start in sales back in 2013. I was selling B2B sales at Apple. So I was in the back of an Apple store selling to small SMBs, mid-markets, companies with software solutions to go with the Apple products that they were doing. So from there, I was always the seller who was doing a lot of his own content and really meticulous about my follow-ups. To be honest with you, I don't think I was that great at sales. I think I was more curious and would do a lot of work outside of the call to craft thoughtful follow-ups. And then from there, that got me into marketing, but I was the marketer doing lead gen or doing events, working very closely with the sellers. As sales enablement kind of came into prominence, I've always done teaching, training, workshops to share what I'm learning, either with my team, with people outside my team on sales and marketing. So as sales enablement kind of rose into prominence, that was just like the perfect lane for me. So I started doing some sales training, some coaching, contracted, doing things like Challenger Sale, Sandler. I studied all the methodologies. And from there, I was kind of curious, like, why isn't this sticking? I didn't see it really having the long-term impact that I would have hoped. And that's when I decided to go in-house. So over the past 5 years, I've stood up three different enablement programs from the ground up, built out a team, supported over 80 sellers globally. I would say over 100, hundreds now between the three teams, and really dig into some of the environmental issues that
Mhm.
have an impact on why sales training doesn't stick and how to really drive performance. That's what I nerd out on. As of the last 6 months, I've been running my independent consultancy, which has been going well. I'm really excited to kind of dig beyond just the surface level training and address some of the environmental issues that impact performance.
I love it. Big
Yeah.
congratulations, and I'm a little bit jealous. Europe is something, we lived in
I love
Europe
it.
for a little while, so
Yeah, I love
I'm
it.
happy, you're enjoying your life, and it seems like, again, the business is working. And you set the stage. You talk about some of these challenges with enablement. I want to
Yeah.
hear it. I want to hear it because your hands are dirty. You already know what's going on. So tell us a little bit more about your observations.
Yeah, so when I got started in enablement, when I got pulled in, I was doing a lot of sales training, and I come from a content creation background, love building workshops, love building learning paths. And I saw a lot of that same thing in the enablement community, especially around onboarding and building these cool training, design, learning management systems and those kinds of things. Spent a lot of time in Seismic and Highspot, but I didn't really see it correlating to revenue. And for
Mm,
me, I'm there to drive revenue. And understanding that I needed to learn how to speak the language of the
mm,
C-suite. And that's something that I didn't know coming into enablement. And those are two completely different languages. So what I realized is it's actually the same thing that sellers are dealing with. When they're selling to a champion at a larger corporation, that champion then has to go and sell to 5, 10, sometimes 15 other people.
mm,
And if I'm speaking to somebody at a director level or a senior director, VP level, which is where I was, then they need to understand how to speak to the C-suite, which is usually going to be a different language. So for me as an enabler, and I see this with a lot of enablement counterparts, is like, how do we speak to the initiatives, to the goals that the C-suite cares about, that my CRO is dialed into? And once I learned how to do that, it really transformed not only the impact I was able to have, but the respect I got within the company, and I was able to grow our enablement team.
I love this. You're talking about buyer personas, saying, hey,
Yeah.
C-suite, or maybe five, or maybe 10 stakeholders might be involved. And historically, at least based on my experience, as a former seller, what you get from enablement is just based on methodologies or framework. This is our rubric. These are the questions you need to ask during discovery, and then you get demo. It's not really focused on the buyers and what they want to hear and they're familiar with. So I'm curious, you talk a lot about buyer enablement. So, and this is top of mind for everyone. Everybody
Mhm.
knows, like, okay, that buying experience has been horrible. And
Yeah.
this is something that we are all, aware of. But how can we actually pull this off in practice? So you go to a company does not have this mindset of buyer enablement. Hey, I have my medic and medpic. Let's just get adoption on that. Or to your point,
Yeah.
we designed this amazing training with tons of content and material for onboarding. Where do you start? Let me ask you this.
Ooh, yeah. So there's a lot of different places to start. But for me, we all are aware of the data on buyer enablement, the Gartner research that buyers spend 17% of their decision-making time talking to sellers and suppliers, which means if they're evaluating three suppliers, 5 to 6% of that time is spent talking to your sales team. So what's happening the other 83 to 95% of the time? So what really shifted the way I approach enablement is when I started looking at who are the personas that are showing up the most in our close one deals. So
Mm-hmm.
a very tactical starting point that I would recommend is just pulling a list from your Salesforce, from your close one deals of the contacts that are involved. You don't even need their email addresses involved, just name and role, or even just the roles of where they're at, what their level is. And I try to triangulate really three things. First of all, what is their sentiment? Are they a champion? Are they a blocker? So is it positive or negative? And what's their involvement? Another is kind of their impact within the company. What's their seniority? So are they VP level, C-suite, director, manager, and user? So at what level are those people involved? And then I try to see how multi-threaded they are. So how many people do I have engaged on a deal? To give you an example, we saw that in a past role that if we had three or more engaged contacts on a deal, our win rate jumped by 40%.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just looking at those three things and seeing what's that mix. And then what I'll often do is I'll take that information and throw that into deep research and do some AI research on what those stakeholders in those industries are facing at that moment. So, what are the problems they're facing? What are the approaches they're aware of to solve that problem? What are the capabilities that they're looking for? And then arm the seller with that information to go into the call, even if they don't know everything about the product.
Yeah.
If they're that aware of what their buyer is facing, then they can earn that respect and start to have an intelligent conversation with them to actually get them to engage. So very tactical way to start. Just pull a list of all the key stakeholders who are on your closed one deals, if you want, compared to closed loss, and then just look at what
Mhm.
those stakeholders are focused on. That'd be a big one.
This is very smart. So we didn't talk about product here. Just look
No,
at our, close one or loss and just understand like who's actually involved, the first step, and then what's top of mind for them. So about
right.
that, you said deep research. Are we looking at only, company news, company specifics, or you rely mostly on, transcripts? Because some of these conversations, especially if it's closed loss, might miss some of these like important data. So what's the focus? Where should we get this data? Where should we be focusing?
If you're internal and can pull transcripts, I love doing that because I can use the exact buyer language that they're using. When I'm
Mm-hmm.
consulting with companies, security sometimes is the issue. I'm working on getting that like SOC
Yep.
2 and all that stuff. So I'm going through that red tape now. And then also there are some tools that I'll integrate with. Pulling those transcripts is going to be the best way because you can get their language and use their language back towards them. So to me, I try to pull transcripts specifically so that I know exactly the way buyers are talking about it at their company so that we can use that language back to
Mm-hmm.
them.
Makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. All right. I wanted to talk about something that you mentioned to me before. If you remember it, when we had a conversation, I was like, okay, what is one skill set that sellers need to really, master today? Because there's
Mm.
so many things we can work on. And you told me writing. You
Oh
said
yeah.
writing is the future. They
Yeah.
need to learn how to write better. But based on my experience, being really good at writing requires, a lot of practice, and feedback. And it's something that it's missing from, our training or enablement, at least, based on my experience. You might
Right.
have some conversations, some role plays, some call reviews, but I've never seen any workshops like, hey, let's sit down and write a good email, even using AI. And that's a smart way to do. So I wanted to hear your perspective. If you work with an organization and they are actually buying this idea that okay, writing is important, writing is the future, they need to write better, how do you actually go about training those reps in writing?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to back up a little bit before I answer your question because there's a
Mm,
little context there. If you think about one of the key shifts in terms of enablement, for me, it's been from focusing on training seller behavior
mhm,
to enabling buyer decisions. So if you think about your deals as a series of small decisions that a buyer needs to make, then our only goal is to influence those decisions as quickly as possible.
mhm,
Now, we talked about the data. They're only spending 5 to 6% of the time actually speaking to you directly.
sure.
So if we're trying to influence those decisions, that tells us the majority of the decision-making time is not happening on the call. So if we're
Mhm,
spending all our time training on-call behavior, objection handling, discovery questions, all that stuff is great. But the majority of the deal is happening outside of the call. So what is the
mhm,
way that we can actually influence the deal when we're not in the room? That's through writing because we're able to actually structure our thinking. We're able to cut all the fluff. We're able to create sound bites that are able to be shared within the company. I like to focus on things like an executive summary, a one-page business case, mutual action
mhm,
plan, POV doc, to actually shape their thinking and how they're approaching the deal. And I like to work on that. I train sellers on how to work on that with the buyer so that they're collaborating on that. Now, getting to the actual writing part of it, how do you actually train that? First of all, AI is great. I don't even see it as a crutch. It's more like training wheels because it's much easier to rewrite something than to write it for the first time. So
yep,
I don't rely 100% on AI, but I use it a lot for a starting point, and then we actually kind of go through the process of refining it because it's much easier to do that. The biggest thing in terms of training reps on how to write is to make sure that you have clear standards for what good looks like. So we'll build a rubric for what that output is. Let's say it's a business case. That business
mhm,
case may have 5 different sections or components in that business case. For each one of those components, we score it 1 through 5. For each one of those scores, I'm going to give you what's a one, what's a two, what's a three, what's a four, what's a five with examples so that everybody at the company can look at a business case and say that problem statement is a 3 out of 5. Why? Because it hasn't been validated by the champion. It doesn't include any metrics, but it does frame a problem that will get worse over time. So we have all of those things kind of laid out there. So we've got a very clearly company wide or company accepted rubric for what good looks like. And that's really the most important thing. At that point, we take our deal, we try to write a problem statement, we work on it, right? And I'm not thinking about how to optimize for training time. I'm trying to think about how to optimize for feedback. So, how many iterations can I get in the
mhm,
span of 10, 15, 30 minutes, right? Because if I can get 5 iterations in 30 minutes, they're going to be 5 times better than someone who just does it once in 30 minutes. On
mhm,
top of that, my sales managers or whoever's doing the sales coaching does not have to be in a meeting or watching a call review to be able to give them feedback on that.
mhm,
So I'm getting them to share it in Slack and say, hey, I'm working on this problem statement. Here's where I'm at. Would love to get feedback. And people can asynchronously provide feedback on a problem statement. So we're getting that iteration. You're getting and receiving, or you're receiving and giving feedback. And over time, it's just going to get better and better. So I'm looking at how do we get reps of writing and refining writing. And then the ultimate judge is the buyer. So did the buyer engage with it? Are they making edits to it themselves, which is the big indicator that they're engaged? And are they able to share it within the company? Is it using their language? Just to recap, really focus on those standards, focusing on having a scoring rubric that you can recognize throughout the company and getting that accepted. That's a big one.
This is really, really interesting because to me it sounds like the system you build is scalable. So as is the
Hmm.
conceptual, idea that hey, we score your actual conversations with your buyers, but the system you build is something that you can implement anywhere. You might need to
Exactly.
tweak based on industry or type of clients they're selling to, but to me it's something that could be scalable. So why I'm actually bringing this up, because I remember I had someone on the show and she said, look, we are used to methodologies, medic, medpic, whatever, for years we practice them, and it's very difficult to bring something scalable for buyer enablement. And I want to challenge that because to me, this is a very scalable system. You just need to tweak a few things based on buyer personas you're selling to, or maybe industry or in type of sales in enterprise mid market. But isn't it something that you can literally copy to another company and just tweak things a little bit here and there?
100%. And I've actually like adapted the original buyer enablement framework that came from Gartner to a
Cool.
lot of the clients that I use. But essentially, it's 4 key decisions. What is our problem? What are the approaches or solutions we could take? What are the
Mhm.
trade-offs? And then the third being, what are the capabilities and metrics we need to achieve for success? And lastly, who are the vendors and other suppliers that can meet those other 3 requirements? So if we can get them to make those 4 decisions regardless of the industry, the product, anything like that, we have a good chance of helping them make a high value, low regret decision, which is what we're looking for.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question about the challenges you face because, yes, conceptually, everybody will be aligned. This is great. Let's roll it out. But then you have to, deal with reps, with their frontline managers, with executive. So, where do you start typically? You start from the top and get that alignment, and then work your way through. Just tell me, some of the challenges you face dealing with people.
Yeah, I have to talk to people. I have to talk to sellers, talk to sales managers, talk to sales leaders. The key is that it's a semi-custom system, right? So there's certain principles that I include with every team that I work with, but you've got to customize it slightly to their buyers, to their seller motion, to their capacity, all of these things. So there's key components that I want to have, but the key is that I want to make sure that it's a collaborative effort so
Mm-hmm.
that the team takes ownership of what's happening. If I have their top one or two sellers involved in this process, they're going to feel a sense of ownership for rolling this out and making sure
Mm-hmm.
that it's actually something that they believe in. Same with sales leaders. If your sales leaders are involved in making these decisions, then they're going to be much more willing to reinforce it and to back it. So the short answer is I want to involve the team in actually designing this. It's kind of a collaborative workshop that happens over the course of 2 weeks normally and 2 to 3 sessions where we work together to kind of refine some of these decisions. So I'm working from the same components, but I'm mixing and matching them different for every client that I work with.
Look, you're experienced. You already, sold for companies. You did marketing. You did enablement, and this is your practice right now. And as a practitioner, obviously, when you start something new, you go through some pivots and iterations. I want to hear like some of the learnings that you had to learn actually doing this because that's the only way to go. Some of the challenges you faced, some of the failures that you learned something from. So if someone is considering bringing this change, said, hey, if you want to switch to bar enablement, we need to go through this shift. What are some
Mhm.
of the pitfalls they have to be aware of and at least be ready for? And how do you change them? How do you fix them?
Yeah, so I can go through. I have so many failures that I can come up with. I think one on the sales side is like you really want to make sure that you show evidence that it works. I think a lot of times in enablement, we'll look at lack of adoption as an issue with the seller because they don't want to adopt our new process. But I
Mhm.
guarantee you, if they see their other teammates getting success with this process, then they'll adopt it because sellers are competitive and they don't want to see that it's working. Most of the time, when sellers don't adopt something, it's because they don't believe that it works. So
Mhm.
you have to put a lot of effort and energy in the beginning to making sure that the team sees that it works and really highlighting those early wins from the new process because that's what's going to help you build momentum.
Mhm.
Another big problem that I had or a mistake that I made when I first got into enablement is our CEO of a billion-dollar valuation company comes to me and says, I've been listening to some calls and I don't like the way we're talking about the product. Can we do like a product certification? So I
Mhm.
spent a month running through like a very elaborate product certification with different levels and different tracks and all that stuff. And it went really well, did not impact revenue at all. So having the guts to push back from leadership when they want a specific thing, because a lot of times it'll be reactive and saying, hey, I just watched this call and I don't like the way we're doing discovery. We need to do a discovery training.
Mhm.
But in reality, if you do a little bit of back and forth consulting, selling, you
Mhm.
might learn that the problem is we're getting the wrong ICP on the call. So we don't have the person who's able
Yeah.
to actually answer the questions on the call to begin with.
Mhm.
Maybe we need to focus on our ICP and how do we identify them. So there's so many different things at play. You have to have the courage to push back on things and position yourself as the expert rather than just saying, okay, this is coming from the top. We need to make this decision now. So those are two things just top of mind that are really big ones is being able to push back and then also really showing those early wins and highlighting those to the team so that they know it works.
I love it. Look, it's
Yeah.
like a good seller. It's all about your observations, discovery, and yes, you do the pushback with some data. Look, this is the data I'm seeing across the board. Your observation is absolutely correct. But look at this. Maybe the bigger problem is that we don't have the right ICP on the call, and that that could be a very scary conversation because you're literally telling the CEO that hey, you guys haven't figured out what you're doing, and that reality check, I think anyone with the same mind will appreciate it because you're running a business. Like it's not about the emotions or ego. And I think to your point, that's how you position yourself as someone who's strategic rather than just order taking, building some training here and there. Let me ask you now another question about top of funnel because everything that we are talking about right now is about conversations. We already, have awareness. We got people into our funnel. You're doing a great job on LinkedIn, and it sounds like, again, dark social is still working. It's working for us too. It works for many of our guests. I want to talk about that because I remember last conversation we had. You said about a very smart practice you're doing. You build this library and you get some of the top creators like Jen Allen, Morgan Ingram. You put their stuff, and then you realize what's actually working for them or not. What's the most surprising trend you found that nobody's actually catching right now? Because everybody's pushing content. But what is it that you think top creators are doing differently?
You mean top creators who are in sales, who are trying
Yes.
to
Yes.
engage new pipeline?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, well, Morgan and Jen are some of the best at this. So I would just refer you to check out their LinkedIn page. What I can do as an enablement person, or what I kind of focus on, is all of the methodologies that are out right now. Sandler, shout out to Keenan at Gap Selling, I think is really great. Medpic, however, like they're all coming from years and years of experience and knowledge and expertise. That being said, my experience in enablement is I'm always spending a lot of time to adapt it to our buyers, to our market, to our industry. So why not just work with our sellers to go directly to the source and be on top of what's happening in the market? Then what you're able to do, and where Morgan and Jen and all these other great sales minds come in, is that I'm pulling sales plays, Kristen Connor, Brian Lamana, Kyle Assay, like Jamal Remier, like these are some of the Gal Aga, who
Mm-hmm.
I know you just had on, John Barrows, like pull have a database of all of these. And then my thinking is the prompts. I have a database of AI prompts as well. So what I'm doing is dynamically providing sales plays that relate to the situation that your buyer is in.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about a methodology, it's kind of a static thing, and it needs to be your playbook needs to be dynamic based on what's in your pipeline and what deals you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
get across the line. So for me, I want to dynamically pull whatever the most relevant sales play is, as well as what is in my pipeline, and kind of work together to build that. I don't know if that's the kind of answer you were looking for, but that's kind of how I approach it. I wouldn't try to own the knowledge that everyone else has come up with. I just take the things that are working and I implement them and see if it works and then test it and roll it out to more people. That's kind of my job.
I think this is a great approach because it's dynamic. It's not like, hey, I build this prompt based on this person or that person, choose and pick and go, write a better, let's say, post. I have another follow-up question on this. Look, I used to be one of those folks and said, hey, if you're an SDR, if you're new in your even full cycle sales, you maybe don't need to be involved on LinkedIn too much or post a lot. Right now, that mindset has shifted a long time ago. But I wanted to ask your question about this. Someone with authority, maybe you're running a company, you've been around for 10, 20 years, you have a network, you can share ideas openly for folks who are actually generating pipeline, because that's a sort of conversation too. Because when we say conversation, everybody thinks about like, okay, one-on-one, face-to-face, sure, it's powerful, but on top of a funnel standpoint, you're still communicating with people, you're still conversing. First and foremost, do you think reps should start actually posting regardless of their seniority? And also, how do they need to do this to sound authentic?
Yeah. So this is a tough one because my gut says, yeah, absolutely. However, you can
Yep.
get your message out there, like definitely be posting. Content is going to lead to conversations.
Yep.
But in reality, like what you're trying to maximize for is trust. And I think a lot of SDRs, even who are posting
Yep.
regularly on LinkedIn, don't really have the trust of their industry because they're posting things that are, you know, clearly bringing you back to you should do business with us. It's branded by the company or it's
Mm-hmm.
about what we do. What you want to show is your judgment, how you approach things. And the more content that you post that is unique to your buyer personas and that is genuinely helpful, the more you add value to their lives, then that the more trust you build. The more trust you build, the more conversation you can open up. So I wouldn't just blanket say like you need to be posting on LinkedIn. I think you need to be adding as much value as you can to that community, whether it's through trade shows, whether it's through the emails that you send, whether it's through your DMs, whatever you're doing. It's not so much about the posting. It's how can I show my judgment in a way that generates trust? Because if I'm an SDR at a company, like I might not have that level of experience or
Yep.
expertise in an industry where someone's been doing business for 20 years. How am I supposed to stack up against that? But what they don't have that I have is access to the market because I'm hearing conversations with people who are making the same decisions as them every time. And while they might be having
Yeah.
this buyer conversation or this buying, making this buying decision once every 12, 18, 24 months, as an SDR, I'm hearing, at the very least, I'm hearing the conversation
Yep.
5, 10 times a week. So
Hmm.
people pay hundreds of dollars to go to a conference just to sit around other people who are facing the same challenges they are.
Hmm.
So as an SDR, I'm thinking, how can I share those insights in a way that's going to tell buyers or prospects, what are other people like me doing? What are other executives like me thinking about? What are some of the challenges that they're facing? That's the piece that is going to add value, and that's going to build trust to where someone says, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm open to talking to them. And I think that's the difference between just posting content because you want to keep visibility
Yep.
versus really building trust and like building up that your reputation online.
You're absolutely on point. It's all about the trust. And my question was mostly for our listeners,
Mhm.
CROs, VP enablement, VP sales. We ask our team to post more. Marketing send this, everybody blasted on LinkedIn. This has been the practice and we know it. And then if an individual talks too much, you might get some shit from from the management said, hey, or you're oversharing. Do we need to think about like a sort of training for social media as well? I've never seen anyone really training reps how to post, what not to post. What are the
Yeah.
best practices? We really focus on when leads coming to the pipeline and getting mid funnel and closing and all that stuff. But how about top of funnel? Because it sounds like again we can generate more meaningful conversations and potentially demand. So do we even consider like some trainings on how to engage on LinkedIn? I've never seen any company. Have you seen anyone actually training their reps on this?
To be honest, I've done some like lightweight things like that before in the
Yeah.
past. If I could give one piece of information there, I would say think about the fact, if you think about brand, let's eliminate that term of
Yeah.
brand and just think about it as your reputation. And when you're posting under your name, a non-company account on LinkedIn, that is your reputation. And that reputation is going to be with you long after you're at a specific company. So if you approach it from that perspective, it's like, hey, this is my reputation, then I think you approach it a little bit differently. You don't try to seem like you know everything. You share what you're learning at the time, you share your journey, and you share it from a place of I'm trying to show you who I am and what I know and how I think about things and what my judgment is. So yeah, trainings are helpful, but I think it's more just reps. It's just getting reps. Like I talked about those iterations, getting that
Yeah.
feedback. I don't think you need a training that. I think you need to work on that and start getting feedback. If you're posting 5 times a week, you should be getting feedback at least 5 times a week from
Hmm.
your peers, from your manager, from AI to see how can we make this better and ultimately from the market to see what's sticking because that's a journey that you can't really shortcut. You just have to figure it
Absolutely.
out,
It's hard,
you
man.
know?
It's
Yeah.
to really
Yeah.
figure out what actually sticks. All
I'm
right.
actually like, I feel a little anxious right now because I'm adjusting my message and I haven't posted in 3 days. I said I'm going to take a week off of posting,
Yeah.
which is something I haven't done in months, just to kind of
Mhm.
reassess some of the content that I'm making. And I'm really happy with it, but I feel the need to always be feeding that algorithm. So yeah, that's another part of it too. But I think just getting those reps in, man, and just making sure that you're putting your thinking out there to the market so they can see how you're thinking and start to trust you.
Plan. I think I walked through this practice and I need to do it again. You want that consistency because there are things that you don't have control over, right? This is social media. Someone else owns that, stadium. You're just
Yeah,
players. But at the
yeah.
same time, if you keep just pushing content to your point, if volume is the only play here, you might realize, first and foremost, I'm not learning anything. I'm not improving. You need to always go through these iterations. Like right now, I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing something wrong, I guess. I have great, audience. I have great, guests on the show. Maybe that I need to tweak my messaging a little bit. So I think it's a iterative process for everyone. Even if you ask maybe Morgan, he is trying new things. I don't think they stick to what they know because they build an audience because people want to again hear new stuff. Let me ask you a question about tools because we talk about process and mindset and all that stuff. I don't want to name drop, but I remember in our previous conversation you said, "Hey, I stay tool agnostic," and I want to hear what's one trend people are currently really overhyping. It could be a certain, let's say, use case for AI, or it could be a specific tool. So through it, let me know what you think of that.
I'm thinking, how many enemies do I want to make as I answer this question?
Unfiltered, brother. Just chatting.
This is just my take. It's
Yep.
not right or wrong, but I do think one thing that is a little bit overhyped in this situation. It can be used correctly, but I think AI role plays on their own are not as valuable as we think they are. I think they can be used really effectively, but it goes back to my personal philosophy on most of the deal happens outside of the call. So if most of our training is focused on what happens during the call and most of the
Mhm.
decision-making process is happening outside of the call, then I think we might be optimizing for the wrong thing. So I do think it's important to really be good on a call, to be a quick thinker, be able to ask the right questions, all that good stuff. But if you have genuine conviction that you can help somebody and you have a genuine, in order to do that, you have to have a genuine understanding of their world and what's happening within it, and you have real curiosity about answering those questions, then it supersedes a lot of in-call training because I'm a
Mhm.
genuinely a curious person. I know what you're dealing with. I've helped tons of people like you before, and I know that we can help you. I don't need to train my tonality. I don't need to train my pacing. I don't need to train a lot of things. I might like skip over my words a little bit or what have you, but it's genuine. It comes off authentic because I know what I'm talking about. So anytime you've spoken to someone who's genuinely convicted about a thing, then they're not thinking about, oh, do I say this here or what's this here? Just listen, be genuinely curious, and you're gonna figure it out. So I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm just saying that if the majority of the deal is happening outside of the call, then we need to think about how we train our reps for what happens outside of the call. I've used AI role plays and I've gotten a lot of value from them. I just don't
Yep.
think that those need to be the focal point. And I think in enablement, especially when I first got started, we were doing so many role plays.
Yep.
Sellers didn't always like it. It didn't feel natural. So I think AI does help with a lot of that. And I think if you're getting ready to get on a call, yeah, run some role plays with AI. But I think that that is a piece that's a part of a much bigger system. And I think I've
Mhm.
seen teams in the past who make that the focal point of their system, where it's not, that's just a piece. It's just a piece of the puzzle. And we need to think about the whole puzzle.
110% with you because one of the big, I wouldn't say pivot, but iteration we did even with the product about a year ago, we realized, okay, all these, role plays could be very helpful during onboarding. So everybody wants to prove themselves. They want to learn about everything, including the product. Yes, this shouldn't be the main focus, but those days you need to learn. You need to gain something. But we realize actually something even about onboarding. To your point, I'm role playing with someone that I don't even know. I don't know about
Exactly.
that bar persona. Can I learn about that bar persona first before practicing? And I'm 100% with you. Role play is just a piece of the puzzle, and even tools like us, and I think other vendors in the space, some of our competitors started realizing this too. You need more than that. You need the reinforcement. You need to give coaching, to your point, based on things that happened when you're not in the room. So some of these, again, conversations with AI should go beyond just practice or role play. Say, hey, I just had this conversation. You're seeing this conversation. Before we role play, can we just break it down? What's missing? How should I save my deal in it? What should I
Hmm.
send in that email? Maybe next conversation. What's the agenda I should share to build some curiosity? I'm 100% with you. I guess at least our own clients actually see this, quick jump in terms of usage and then, you know, just plateau because, sellers at some point you're like, hey, I gotta sell. I gotta go on
Yeah.
a call. I gotta sell right now. I have a number to hit. I learned enough. Leave me alone. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails? These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only, revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai.
And let me
Yep.
just say this too, because I'm a big fan of comedians. So like Dave Chappelle, Jerry Seinfeld, Cash Singh, these guys, like a lot of them, you'll hear about them practicing their
Yep.
set in front of small audiences. And like, Dave Chappelle will show up at like a corner comedy store
Mm.
unannounced just to work out new material,
Yep.
right? So if he's working out that material with AI, he might be really good with his delivery,
Yep.
his timing, his pacing, and get out on the stage and no one laughs.
Yeah,
So what they're doing when they're practicing and workshopping that material, they're seeing, okay, this got a reaction out of the crowd. Oh, this was funny to this audience. Let me try it in this
exactly.
scenario. It was also funny. So there's no substitute for just getting in front of customers. And sometimes you're gonna bomb. It's okay. Even the
Yeah,
best people bomb on a call,
of course.
or but when you do that, you start to get that feedback. So you build that confidence naturally because you see what's resonating with the specific audience. So the
Hmm.
AI is going to help you get confident in delivering it. But until you see what's going to get a reaction, you're not able to really be confident in your message and submit what you're doing. So that analogy to me is like gold because that's how even the best learn, and even the best are going to bomb on things that they think are funny. So
Hmm.
that's how I see it in sales too. Is there's no substitute for just getting in the ring and getting knocked down a few times.
Exactly. Like you used to always pitch your product this way. Said, look, practice is great. Okay, you do it with your coach, with someone else. When you get inside the ring, and you get surprised when you get punched in the mouth, and that's where you actually learn what's going on. And it's good. It's like those good old days. I had someone call shouting. It was annoying, but early on, I think it could help just to listen, not to interrupt, and then come back and say, "Hey, just a nudge. You're talking too much, dude. Let them just share what they want to share. I'm with you." All right. Look, I want to ask quick questions. We are ending this, and I want to hear again your answers, unfiltered as it is right now. Tell me about some of the personal development that you kind of like built as a founder and strategies outside of sales. Like what really influenced you as a person walking through this journey?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I've always wanted to build a business that allows me to have an impact, generate income for my family, and have some freedom, some time freedom. So for me, it's having the flexibility to spend time with my daughter, but also being working at unorthodox hours. Like sometimes people
Yep.
get a DM or an email from me and they're like, dude, it's 11:30 where you are. Like, what are you doing? So just it puts me in the sales seat as well. I
Mm-hmm.
like getting those reps to that point. So I feel like I'm brand new as an SDR and as an
Mm-hmm.
AE, because
True.
I'm selling my business. So making sure that I still am able to practice what I preach, and there's just no substitute for it. So I think that's the biggest one is just building that discipline and building that habit and that routine of pushing forward at something, even when you don't always see the results from it, which goes back to our conversation about LinkedIn. Like you don't always see the feedback or the results from something, but I'm still going to show up and continue to get better and improve. So for me, that's a big one.
This is important, and the reason why I'm asking this question because some of them, I guess, secretly after we, press stop, they ask, "How did you get started, man? What's working?" I say, "You want to start something?" So I know it's scary, like going on your own, but we are trying to teach people how to actually do this job. And to
Yeah.
me, biggest part of entrepreneurship is figuring things out and be resilient enough to stick around. And to your point, having this like beginner mindset that I have to be, relevant. I have to be that SDR generating lead for my company. I have to be the AE who can actually have good conversations. And I think many leaders might underestimate the power of learning that they had during all these years, and taking that first step is always the scariest part. I would say, like, you pass that 0 to 1 is extremely difficult, and then 1 to 10, and then you're, I think, off the races. At least this is my experience, like each time I start something.
It's absolutely terrifying, but I think most people don't have the ability to stay in the game long enough to see
Exactly.
the results of what they're doing. So the name of the game for me is just to be able to stay in the game,
Yep.
honestly. But it doesn't get any easier. You just get more equipped to deal with the hardness of it.
Than 10%. And someone was asking me, "Hey, you raised before. Why didn't you go get some VC money? You got great traction. You got a good team." I said, "You know why? Because I'm doing it on my own. And this is what I want." That goes back to my why. I don't want to, turn to a, philosopher right now, but to your point, I said, I want to spend time with my family. I want to have this flexibility. I want to just, work in very unorthodox, hours, because that's what works for me. And if you go back to this and keep reminding yourself, I think you can say, "Hey, I can go with my own speed because I'm learning, I'm iterating, I'm getting better at what I do." But to your point, the first step is always the hardest. Now, let me ask you this. If you can finish this sentence for me, sales leaders would be 10x more effective if they just.
Manage their team the way they manage their sales cycles as a seller. I think that sales leaders typically come from being top sellers and then they start to abandon all the things that make them a good seller.
Mhm.
So doing deep discovery, understanding um, time and score is what I call it, but understanding the situation, being able to pull the answer out of your buyer versus giving them the answer. I think you're basically running an internal sales cycle, but the output
Mhm.
is not revenue anymore. It's the performance of your team. And I think that when sellers, top sellers, turn into sales managers, they spend a lot of time trying to control and manipulate the deal so that it works. Or here's what worked for me, just do this. Or there's frustration because
Yeah.
people don't have the same drive that they had. And if they apply those same principles that made them a top seller into being a top sales leader, then you're able to produce the results in your team. So that's the biggest thing that I see is like a lot of sales managers are great at sales, but
Yeah.
being good at sales and then being a good coach are two different skills. And so it's understanding how to translate those things.
Another topic for another day, but that tells me about leadership enablement, really coaching the coach.
Yeah.
So they gain these skill sets because nobody trained them. And the
Yeah.
expectation is like, yes, help with the numbers and also train your reps, keep, the morale high. And I think that's one of the biggest actually challenges I'm noticing even with some of our own clients, that leaders themselves don't even know how to reinforce things. So all these coaching sessions, turn to pipe review. Again, another topic for another day.
But you know what, too?
Look,
I'm empathetic to the fact that it's not all on them, too. It's the environment. It's the way that they're incentivized a lot of times. It's not
exactly, yeah.
in a way that influences them to actually focus on those skills or to be even be able to coach. So
Hmm.
it's two pieces, the chicken and the egg. So you
Yeah.
have to focus on the environment as well.
Makes sense. Okay, our previous guest, Venkat Nagaswamy, he's the CRO of Splashtop. He asked you
Okay.
a question. He said, with all the changes we see with AI, how do you see the future of enablement changing?
That's a great question. I think the future of enablement will be about orchestrating systems more than it is about training sellers because you're trying to manage three different pieces of data. You're trying to manage what's going on in your buyer's world, market research, buyer intelligence. You're trying to manage sales plays, sales tactics, sales process. And then you're also trying to manage new products, new offers, new deal structures. So those three things together, you're always trying to stay on top of and orchestrate based on what's in one seller's pipeline. So I think it's going to make sales development, sales performance much more tailored to that seller and what's going on in their pipeline at that moment.
Would that be fair to say that we need more AI enabled enablers?
100%. I think the role will naturally move. You see it in RevOps already. So much
Yeah,
of what RevOps has to do is
yeah,
involving AI now. But I think enablement, being knowledge managers at a certain level, I don't think that's the most important or the only thing that enablement does. So don't massacre me for that. But I think understanding and being on top of that knowledge and being able to deploy it at the right moment, that judgment is going to be what's most important. Managing, like AI is great, but it doesn't have an opinion on a lot of things. So you
true.
have to have that opinion based on what's working. So I think a lot of enablement will shift to kind of just AI orchestrators.
Now,
Yeah.
our next guest is Haley Huggerty. She's an experienced Sandler, trainer. They own an office in Boston for 20 odd years.
Nice.
I want you to ask a question to her. So when she's on the show, I can ask her.
What is the most important factor in making a seller or sales leader strategic? I think that's a really important thing to think about is how do we make our leaders strategic versus just tactical in what they do and what their approach is. So I think how do we make leaders and sellers strategic?
That's a great question. You're talking about frontline managers, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So make sure I ask that. To wrap
Yeah.
it up, sell me this pen. So some people love it, some people hate it. Put that aside. But historically, we asked these questions, and the main reason why we picked this name, and we were sitting, getting drunk over a nice, drink, and my co-founder asked me, "What's the name of this thing?" I was like, "Dude, as funny as it sounds, one of the weirdest questions they asked me my first tech sales job was sell me this pen, obviously." So
Yeah.
right now things are changing, and many people are just kind of like staying away from this question during hiring, talent. If you wanted to change it from sell me this pen to sell me this, what would you add?
Tell me this change. Tell me the change that I need to be making. What is the change in behavior? What is the change in worldview? What is the change in my environment that I need to be aware of that I'm not? So I
I
think
love that.
all of us are just selling change at the end of the day. Yeah, sell me this change. I'd go with that.
There we go. I gotta go register that URL. Steal it from you because I think that's
Yeah,
very
you got it,
smart.
man. You got it.
All right, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's great to have you on the show. If someone wants to reach out to you, can they and how?
Yeah, just hit me up on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the easiest place to find me. It's just linkedin.com/n/Sir Lawrence Wayne.
I love that.
Lawrence Wayne was already taken. I'm in the UK. If you're knighted, you get a sir in front of your name. So I've just preemptively knighted myself. So Sir Lawrence
Your
Wayne, you can find me
royalty,
there.
my friend. Tell the truth.
Exactly.
All right, brother. Thank you very much. All the best,
Yeah.
and until next time. Bye for now.
Thank you. Take care.